scariest memories is being taken away?
I was taken when I was 6 years old.
What was happening
I
there?
don't understand why I was going to school.
Because I seen her leaving.
language, we were punished.
Hit me always punished for with a broom.
I don't remember.
Speaking our language.
I would hear crying. A lot of crying from the kids. Cry my heart out because I was so scared.
These people talked all the time and expected me to do the same. Told me many hearts beating together makes us stronger. They said I should tell my story, that you can't understand where you're going if you don't understand where you've been.
In the heart of Canada's wilderness, where the rivers whisper and the trees stand silent, witness. One boy's journey unfolds, a story of resilience, loss, and the unbreakable spirits of the Indigenous identity. This is Indian Horse. Based on Richard Wagmany's powerful novel, Indian Horse tells us the story of Saul Indian Horse, an Anishinaabe boy whose life is shaped by the harrowing legacy of Canada's residential schools. Stripped of his language, family, and traditions, Saul finds solace in hockey. But even the ice, meant to be a place of freedom, is tainted by racism and suffering. His journey is not just one of survival, but reclaiming an identity that was nearly erased. This documentary will explore the film's key themes: cultural identity and displacement, the impact of residential schools, hockey as a survival and resistance, and nature as a source of strength, and how they connect to the lived experiences of Indigenous peoples today. By understanding Saul's journey, we can better recognize the enduring resilience of Indigenous communities and reflect on our own role in supporting truth, reconciliation, and justice.
My grandmother had always referred to the universe as the great mystery. Mystery fills us with awe and wonder. It is the foundation of humility, and humility is the foundation of all learning. So we do not seek to unravel this. We honor it by letting it be that way forever.
Before the arrival of residential schools, Saul's world was rich with Anishinaabe traditions. He was raised on the land, learning from the wisdom of his ancestors. But that life was stolen when he was forcibly taken to St. Jerome's, a residential school designed to erase Indigenous culture. The school stripped children of their names, language, and traditions. Saul, like so many others, was forced to forget who he was. He endured physical and emotional abuse, but the greatest wound was the loss of his cultural identity. The theme of cultural identity and displacement in Indian Horse is not just Saul's story. It reflects the real-life experiences of many Indigenous people in Canada today. The legacy of the residential schools, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure continues to shape the lives of Indigenous communities in a profound way. In the film, Saul is taken from his family and forced into residential schools where many children are punished for speaking Anishinaabe language. This mirrors the experiences of thousands of Indigenous children who were stripped of their language and forced to speak only English or French. Today, many Indigenous languages are critically endangered. Saul's story also reflects the broader reality of forced integration. While residential schools are now closed, Indigenous peoples still face systemic barriers that make it difficult to fully reclaim their culture. Saul's time in residential schools exposes him to physical, emotional, and psychological abuse, just as thousands of Indigenous children endured in real life. The system was designed to kill the Indian in the child by erasing their culture, language, and identity. Many survivors of residential schools suffer beatings, starvation, and sexual violence at the hands of teachers and priests. Despite this painful history, many Indigenous people today are working to reclaim their identities and heal from the trauma inflicted by residential schools. Just as Saul finds moments of healing through hockey and his connection to the land, Indigenous communities are using language, culture, and traditional practices to rebuild their sense of self.
You look like you've never seen people skate before, Saul.
I don't like games much.
Just watch. There's a genuine rhythm underneath all this mayhem. Once you grasp the rules, you start to see it.
I see it already.
You do?
The rink became my escape. The ice, my obsession. The game, my survival.
In Indian Horse, hockey is more than just a game for Saul. It is both a form of escape and a battleground where he faces racism and exclusion. His story reflects the real-life struggles of many Indigenous athletes who have had to use sports as a way to survive, prove themselves, and challenge the discrimination they face in Canadian society. Hockey is an escape from trauma for Saul. It is a refuge from the pain of residential schools. The ice gives him a sense of freedom and purpose, something that many Indigenous youth also find in sports today. Many Indigenous youth turn to hockey, lacrosse, or other sports to find a way to cope with personal or intergenerational trauma caused by colonization, family separation, and cultural erasure. The hockey rink is a safe place where a lot of athletes can express themselves, escape hardship, and build a sense of community. While hockey offers opportunity, it also offers a space where racism remains a harsh reality. Saul's experiences being targeted by racist fans and players, being treated differently despite his skill, mirror the experiences of many Indigenous athletes.
Number 13, you're gonna need an Indian hearse.
I'm sick of this.
We're gonna scalp you, Indian!
That Indian hearse line was pretty good, though.
Take it out. Wagon burner. Nice friendly town they got here.
Indigenous players like Fred Saskamoose is one of the first Indigenous NHL players, and Jordan Tutu, the first Inuit NHL player, faced racial slurs, exclusion, and systematic barriers in their careers. Even today, Indigenous hockey players continue to experience racist taunts and discrimination in amateur and professional leagues. For example, in 2022, a 16-year-old Indigenous player in Quebec Junior Hockey League faced racial slurs from opponents and spectators alike. Despite these challenges, Indigenous athletes have used hockey to push back against racism and demand respect in a sport that has long been dominated by non-Indigenous players. In Indian Horse, Saul's connection to nature is a source of strength, healing, and identity. The land represents freedom, resilience, and spiritual guidance, offering him a sense of belonging when everything else is taken away. This deep bond with nature is not just a part of Saul's story. It reflects the Indigenous worldview, where the land is seen as a teacher and a healer, and an essential part of cultural survival. Throughout Indian Horse, Saul finds comfort and clarity in the natural world, especially when he is struggling with trauma. When Saul is forced into residential schools, he loses access to his traditional way of life. However, when he is in the forest or on the ice, he feels at peace and connected to his ancestors. Even though hockey is played in arenas, Saul first learns to skate on a frozen lake at the residential schools, highlighting the connection between sport and nature in Indigenous tradition.
I came far to make this journey. I could feel my family and my ancestors. It was here, in this place, where everything started and everything ended. I was with them again.
For Indigenous people across Canada, nature is just not scenery. It's a living spiritual force that provides guidance and healing. Many Indigenous communities continue to use land-based healing as a way to reconnect with culture and heal from historical trauma. Sweat lodges, fasting, and vision quests are spiritual practices that take place in nature, helping people seek clarity and healing. Just like Saul finds peace in the wilderness, many Indigenous people turn to traditional practices in nature to regain balance and strength. In many Indigenous cultures, nature teaches a valuable lesson about respect, patience, and interconnectedness. The changing seasons reflect the cycle of life, reminding people to adapt and move forward. Animals like the eagles, bear, and turtle hold spiritual meanings, offering wisdom and guidance. Indigenous language often have deep ties to land, with words and stories that reflect local landscapes and ecosystems.
Your silence is killing you.
The school. What was happening there? I was wrong. Your glory, Saul.
The story of Indian Horse is more than just one boy's journey. It's a reflection of the real-life struggles and resilience of Indigenous people in Canada. Through Saul's Indian Horse's journey, we witness the painful consequence of cultural identity loss, residential school trauma, systemic racism, and displacement. But we also see the unbreakable strength of Indigenous communities in the face of oppression. The themes in Indian Horse challenge us to educate ourselves, acknowledge the past, and take action in supporting Indigenous communities. What we can do to learn more about the residential schools is to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's reports, watch films, read books, and advocate for Indigenous rights and reconciliation efforts through local initiatives, education, or political actions. Watching Indian Horse opened my eyes to the depth of Indigenous resilience. I learned that the trauma of residential schools is not just a historical event. It is a reality that still shapes lives today. But what stands out the most is the strength of Indigenous peoples in reclaiming their identity, healing their communities, and demanding justice. Despite everything, they continue to fight for their culture, their stories, and their actions.
Your glory, Saul.
lost. They didn't understand. They didn't recognize their parents. They didn't recognize anybody in the community.
Why was I like that? Why didn't I speak up?
To this day, there's a lot of us that don't know how to speak our native tongue.
If you succeed going to school, that's great.
But I want my grandchildren to know where I've been and why I do the things that I do.
It's up to we as a community to bring back or have that pride in our souls.
We have a beautiful, incredible, beautiful gift that was given to us as our
But
children.
the more you talk about it, the healing takes place inside you.
My name is Julie.
My name is Shirley Ida.
My name's Larry Tedor Jr.
My name is Saul Indian Horse.
And this is my story.